one place called Roseto in Italy. And he got interested in them because they were a tightly knit community, rather isolated from adjoining communities. And they discovered that this group of people had 1/3 the rate of heart disease of anybody else in the state or the country. And most of the social ills that afflict communities, they were hardly had any of that. And he got so interested, he set up a team to investigate. And he said, well, it's because of their Italian lifestyle, you know, the olive oil and the vegetables, the Mediterranean diet. And no, when they came here, they couldn't get olive oil. They were too poor, so they wound up using lard like everybody else did. And in all of the health factors that he thought helped, they were as bad as all their neighbors. And the upshot was that he finally concluded that what it was a sense of community. Everybody, by necessity, was helping everybody else. And they kind of had their own set of mores for the community, and people lived by them, and yeah, so there was not the stress of life. Anyway, that was an interesting story.
That is interesting. Well, go back to when you're talking about Scotland, I think, right?
That's where we started. Do you want to start there?
I want to hear that again about
the records.
Yeah.
Okay. In Edinburgh, Orson Pratt came there with a companion in 1840.
Was he one of the first into Scotland?
Yeah, but it wasn't his first. He arrived in Scotland several months earlier and worked in Glasgow for a bit. Then he moved to Edinburgh. And 6 weeks after he arrived there, he baptized 6 people. 2 of those people, 2 of the 6, the very first 2, were Richard Ballantyne's older brother and older sister. And so when I started looking at trying to get correct early baptism dates for the family, that's where I went to look, was in those records. And I kind of got interested in them and looked at how they put them together. And each person had it was a big wide spreadsheet kind of a thing. And at the far right, there was just one column that was left open for comments, and they would have a lot of cut off.
Yeah.
Or the other one was emigrated to Zion, or died. Anyway, they contained all of the baptism information, birth dates. My analysis of the records, I looked over several generations until about the beginning of the 1900s, and found that about 1/3 of all the converts immigrated to Utah. 1/3 left the church, and the other 1/3 carried on. But over time, the numbers just got smaller and smaller, and so they got more and more area into each little branch. Then the branch would be discontinued, and they'd soon only have.
They just kept consolidating.
Yeah, they'd only have a branch in Edinburgh and maybe Glasgow, when in the early days they'd had a couple of dozen branches spread all over.
So Richard Ballantyne's older sister, one of the first converts in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
When did he join the church?
He joined, they were baptized in June of 1840. He was not baptized until 1842. Now, it's really an interesting story because it took 6 weeks for Henry and Margaret to hear the gospel, be converted, and join the church. And so Margaret wrote to Richard, who lived further south, about 40 miles, and said, "Hey, you've got to listen to this and hear this." And she sent him a copy of the Book of Mormon. And Richard initially, because he was working very closely with a pastor in, I don't know, a Reformed, it was a Protestant church. And he ran a Sunday school, and he didn't want to hear anything about this. But he decided he had to at least find out why his misguided siblings got into it. So he started studying it, and it became a whole year of turmoil for Richard. He studied everything. He read through the whole Bible in that year, and wrote down lots of things, and it was fascinating to me because a lot of the things he pulled out and wrote as scriptures were the same scriptures that missionaries use today to try and focus people on the validity of the church. And I don't know, maybe he had missionaries. He mentions a couple of missionaries.
These are from his journals, is that what you're reading?
Yeah, these all come from his journals. Yeah. Anyway, it took him a whole year before he finally got a testimony. And then he went and told the pastor, and that was it. You know, you're out of here. No more Sunday school. No more working with my. I think it was the guy's. No, it wasn't the minister's daughters. It was the richest guy in the parish, whose daughters apparently had some eye on Richard.
He was single?
He was single, yeah. Anyway, all that ended, and the persecution got very intense, and so they decided the only thing they could do was to leave Scotland.
The three of them?
There were Richard, 2 sisters, his mother, and a mentally disabled brother who was in a mental institution in Scotland until they left Scotland. And Richard went way out on a limb and said, "I can't leave him here." He'd been institutionalized because he became very threatening to his mother. So he was a kind of a difficult case, but Richard said that he was somewhat better, to the point where he was not threatening in any way. So he lived with Richard the rest of his life.
What year was this that they left?
They left in 1843. And just before they left, Richard went to see his older sister Margaret, who had joined the church, back 3 years before. And she was dying of tuberculosis. And so Richard told her that he wouldn't forget her family. And because all her children had joined the church, except her husband did not. He was a butler to a nobleman.
Mm.
And he was right in the high life. He had to go to the continent, to London, everywhere these guys went to spend their dollars, their pounds, he was with them to be at their beck and call. And anyway, as it turned out, this is another really fascinating story. We're probably not following any pattern here. Richard's family came to Nauvoo, and he became closely associated with John Taylor in the printing business, and John Taylor took a liking to Richard's two sisters, and eventually married both of them. Richard remained single, and he remained in Nauvoo after the big expulsion. He stayed to take care of John Taylor's business interests. He was single and he had no family, so he and his family, his sisters and his mother, didn't leave Nauvoo until, I guess, the fall of 1846. And as they were going across Iowa, they were in this company of poor saints, you know, and they had the same hard time as the first companies had going across Iowa. But he met his future wife in the same wagon company, and they were married in winter quarters in 1847 when they got to Iowa finally. Anyway, where were we? How'd we get off on that? We were talking about records.
Yeah, no, I was curious because wasn't he in the first company that came to the valley?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't in the first company. Okay. He was in the next company that Brigham Young led. Now, I was trying to think the other day whether that I'm having a hard time believing that Brigham Young, who left Salt Lake almost immediately after he got there, he just set things up, picked out the temple site, put John Smith in as the stake president, and he headed back to. I'm trying to think whether he led that next company that fall or the next spring. I don't remember. Anyway, that's the company that Richard and his family were in. So they were not in the first company.
Interesting. That's good. You know what is